Good morning, everyone. Thank you for attending this morning's presentation. My name is Marios Chrysantho and I'm the Managing Director of Bluelight CRM. I'm delighted that joining me is Nuna Steniasek, Director of Communications at the Institute of Materials, Minerals and Mining, or IOM3. If you have any questions as we go along, please add them to the question box on the right-hand side. We will allow some time at the end to answer as many as we can, but if a more in-depth answer is required, we will contact you directly. The theme of the session is challenges and how to overcome them. Challenges can be foreseen or unexpected. One requires preparation, the other agility, but both depend on honesty and close collaboration. This short case study examines how through advanced preparation, honesty and openness between stakeholders and a very agile approach to problem solving, IOM3 were able to rise to the challenge of delivering a hugely complex digital transformation project where budget and time were major considerations. And how halfway through the project, against the backdrop of a global pandemic, the team were able to sustain momentum as well as account for the rapidly changing business and technology requirement. My role is to guide the presentation, but what I really wanted is for Nuna to share the IOM3 story, warts and all. Firstly, a little bit about us. We're a not-for-profit sector specialist. Membership organisations, trade associations, charities, institutes, societies are pretty much what we do. We provide best-in-class products and specialise in all things Microsoft and particularly Dynamics 365 CRM. We've provided products and services to the NFP sector for close to 20 years in one form or the other. We have deep technical knowledge and data integration are very much specialities of ours. And these are just some of the organisations we work with, reflecting the very many various different types of not-for-profit organisations. Our products are focused on providing all aspects of an NFP's functions across areas such as membership, fundraising, finance, events, education, communications, engagement, and more. And now a little bit about the Institute. IOM3 is a major UK science and engineering institution whose activities promote and develop all aspects of the materials cycle, from exploration and extraction through characterization, processing and application to product recycling and reuse. The Institute represents a combination of scientific, technical and human resources, which links industry, government, education, research and the academic world, with a current membership of just over 15,000. And just to set the scene for the project itself, phase one was delivered in 5 months. This focused on the CRM and portal, predominantly with a membership focus, and intended to move IOM3 from their legacy CRM, which was due to be decommissioned at the end of January 2020. Phase 2, which is currently underway, intends to deliver the remaining elements in a little over 6 weeks' time. So it's a bit of a perfect opportunity to hear about a project which has already delivered a phase 1 successfully and how its transition to phase 2 was impacted by both known and unknown challenges. Now, phase 1 deliverables included dynamic CRM implementation, data migration from legacy sources, and an integrated member portal with a number of different functions such as online joining, renewals, payments, registrations, profile and preferences. And a bit of a summary of the various stages of the project. A discovery phase right at the beginning preceded what then became 3 streams focusing on people, for example, training, preparation, testing, development for both the CRM and the portal, and of course data, where we had an iterative data migration process. Now the streams then combined into a full UAT, user acceptance testing phase, shortly prior to go live. Sounds easy, but it never is. Then it was on to phase 2, which was somewhat impacted in March this year, of course. And these are the elements that will be delivered in October. And they cover the main website and CMS, as well as a number of different areas that were not included in phase 1, across events, awards, training, groups, email communications and engagement, commercial sales, finance, and virtual events, a new addition, which we'll talk about shortly a little bit more. Now, some of the objectives at the outset. Most, if not all, should be familiar to any organisation undertaking a similar technology transformation. They're certainly not rocket science. Nuna, are you able to maybe give us some examples where benefits have potentially already been realised in some of these areas?
We've already seen some benefits just by moving to Dynamics from our old system. So having the member portal integrated with the CRM means that we can actually see much better what's happening when members interact with the portal. We've got a much better view of our data. Things that were not really visible in the previous system can be accessed more easily. And the fact that everybody's got access to the system and can view data and produce their own reports has been a huge benefit, because previously there were reports that we had to rely on specialist knowledge within the membership team or help from the actual supplier to produce. So now people have a much better view of the data, and the reporting is already there, and efficiencies in things like bulk updating or making changes ourselves. Those have already been realised.
Fantastic, and clearly, obviously, there's quite a bit more to come in phase 2 and beyond.
Absolutely.
Now, challenges in general, well, some have always been known. Take the old project management triangle, for example. It's something that developers have always delighted in asking project managers, pick two. Is it possible to have all three? Well, it depends. It's how you balance the triangle and expectations, of course, which are key. It's probably fair to say we focused on time, Nuna, because, but do you feel that any other aspects suffered because of that?
Well, time was definitely of the essence, because we had essentially a guillotine at the end of January, so that wasn't an option. We had to deliver within the 5 months. I don't think we compromised on quality. What was delivered at the end of the phase 1 is exactly what we expected and more, I think. With costs, we did have a defined budget, and we were very careful that we looked at what was involved in phase 1 and how that would use a proportion of our budget for the whole project. We did spend a lot on the data side of things, but I think that was absolutely necessary, because obviously membership database system, that's the foundation of your whole system is the data. We had to delay with our member online joining for various reasons. I think that's really the only thing that kind of carried on a bit longer than the original timescale. But other than that, we were certainly on time and on budget, and no compromise on quality as far as we're concerned.
So it is possible to balance it, but yeah, it takes a bit of hard work, I think.
It certainly does.
Common challenges. So something a little bit more specific to projects, technology projects, CRM projects perhaps. It's by no means exhaustive. Again, should be very familiar. I suppose resources, both internally in terms of staff, team involvement and time, but also project budgets. Have you fully accounted for all aspects? And deadlines, are they real or are just a preference? Is there a real need to do it so fast? Certainly in the case of IOM3, it most certainly was a need to do that fast. Maintaining business as usual, always a challenge, and ensuring the project teams are not overwhelmed or impacted in their day jobs. And of course, data, always a challenge and requires realistic planning and effort rather than just being an afterthought. Presumably, Nuna, some of these ring a bell, and I think you mentioned a couple of them. But what are your thoughts and any examples of how these were addressed within the IOM3 project?
Well, resources obviously a key consideration in any major project like this, and we had commitment from the top down in the organisation in terms of the trustees, the senior management team, and everybody who was actually involved in the project was aware of its importance to the organisation as a whole. So we had a specific project team for phase 1 and support from other members of the staff where that was needed while that team focused on delivery. Deadlines, as you say, we had a cut-off deadline, so there were specific timescales in place for each part of the project, and that really helped us, I think, to focus and to deliver. And business as usual, as I said, we did have some backup from other members of the team, but it was certainly a very intensive time for everybody, and I think that's something you have to be prepared for and prepared to resource. We also employed a project manager, which I think was absolutely essential for a project of this size. And in terms of organising us, making sure that there was a project plan that was realistic, that people were aware of it, and everything ran to time, and support was implemented where necessary. That was a big factor in ensuring the project's success.
That's really useful. I mean, the next slide is really about top tips. Again, should be fairly obvious. I suppose usually the question is whether they're in fact fully implemented rather than known. So clear planning and communications, getting everybody on the same page, senior management support for organisation-wide commitment and priority, a dedicated team to drive the project in a controlled way, buy-in to embed adoption and ownership throughout the organisation during and post-delivery, and close collaboration. It's not always roses, but an open and honest approach is probably essential. So I suppose it's kind of following on to what you've just said, Nuna, but any other thoughts around, particularly around the planning, the senior management support and the team itself?
We had most of the senior management team involved in the project from the start, from the supplier selection and then regularly on board meetings, so everybody was aware of what was happening in various aspects and being able to support where necessary. And that I think was a major bonus, and I think a requirement for a project of this size. I've been to quite a few meetings beforehand, case studies of other organisations that had run similar projects, and also talked to people who had done recent CRM projects as well. And the message there was loud and clear that, you know, the support from senior management is really important, and having the right people involved in the project is really key to its success. So that's a kind of lesson I took home from those meetings, and I think it's definitely worked in our case to have that whole organisation commitment, and everybody's totally clear about the importance of the project and their role within it.
Absolutely, it certainly make things a hell of a lot easier for us during the project to have that commitment.
I think the decision-making process as well is important, that you've got a clear structure and you know who's making the decisions. So there's no time wasted or toing and froing in that sort of thing, that if decisions need to be made and made quickly, then you know exactly who to go to and who needs to be involved. So that's Absolutely. Another aspect that is really important. Absolutely.
Now moving on to some specific phase one challenges. You know, how do you prioritise what or who's included in phase one? Who gets to wait for phase two? How do you deal with a changing environment? Do you plan and deliver phase one, stop, review, and start phase two, or do you plan the entire project from the start? How do you ensure that phase one does not consume all available budgets, with phase two delivery being the poor relation? And how do you start up again and avoid project fatigue between phases? What do you think, Nuna? Were there any particular lessons learned from phase one, or how did you feel that these kind of challenges were met?
I think after we'd appointed Bluelight as our supplier, we were very much in your hands in terms of how the project ran and what was feasible within the time available and how we approach it. So I think that was very much a sort of collaborative decision making, and also being led by your expertise. The difficulty, project fatigue, I mean, we had a very intense period of activity up until Christmas on our data. Then we were quite lucky to have the Christmas break before we went into the UAT phase after Christmas, which was intense, leading up to the go live time. But I think, again, the clear goal and the collaboration with your development team meant that everybody was very clear about, you know, where we were heading and what needed to be done, and we certainly had the support of your development team as well to make sure we were on the right track and everybody felt confident of where we were going.
That's great. Thanks, Nina. Finally, unforeseen challenges. This wasn't intended to be a sort of a COVID presentation anyway. But of course, it is the major unknown. Could it really have been foreseen or mitigated for? And of course, how do you respond to something like that? Panic, tread carefully, accelerate your plans. Clearly, nobody could have fully prepared for it. But how do you cope with everyone working remotely all of a sudden? Clearly, a degree of uncertainty did and still exists. Nida, what are your thoughts on the unknown challenge posed by the pandemic? I mean, it was obviously right in the middle of phase 2 discovery. How did this affect the project overall, and was it a positive or a negative?
We were quite lucky in that we had already, during phase 1, worked remotely to a certain extent, because we have offices in 3 different locations. So because the phase 1 project team was located in different offices, we used Teams quite a lot, and conference calls to communicate and keep in touch. So we were already kind of up and running on the remote working, and I think when we all went into lockdown, the people that had been in that phase 1 team were kind of unfazed by the situation. We kind of moved seamlessly into remote working. The phase 2 discovery, we were just about to do some website workshops, and I think that was slightly difficult in that we had a new team of people to work with that we had never met. But actually, with Zoom and a kind of smaller workshops and individual interaction, that actually worked quite well. And we found during lockdown, people were more available actually. So where you're looking to get people together for workshops, they weren't out at meetings, they were all at home at their desks. So that was definitely a positive. And I think, it's kind of grown from strength to strength. Now we think nothing of having online meetings, and the fact that you can collaborate so easily, share screens, training. We've been recording training so that that's online for people to access straight away. I mean, there are benefits, undoubtedly.
And it probably accelerated certain plans, particularly around events, I think, didn't it?
As an organisation, certainly, we were looking within a year or two to develop our webinars and increase our webinar program. So that kind of propelled us into the future on that. And that's something that we've been doing, online workshops for our membership, fellowship workshops and professional qualifications, remote meetings. I mean, we found that if we want the contribution of experts or people who are kind of quite senior in their jobs to be able to interact with us on things like membership assessments, it's much easier to get hold of somebody for an hour or two online than to expect them to travel down to London to the office and spend a whole day travelling. So that's been a benefit, and savings on meeting costs for us have been really quite huge. So that's something we're hoping to keep on in the future, is to have more meetings online rather than having to have people in offices and having to give them sandwiches and meeting rooms.
Of course, absolutely. Well, thank you so much, Nuna, and we'll wrap up the presentation there. By all means, post your questions, and we'll hopefully see you throughout Chase over the next couple of days through the Experts Hub. Thank you very much.